Welcome to our virtual public meeting for the Three Rivers Regional Transit Development Plan. We're going to get started here now. I'll switch really quick to our project agenda. In this meeting, we'll provide a quick update on the project status and review the TDP process and give an overview of the region's public transit landscape. We'll also discuss highlights from our previous stakeholder and public input activities and explain how these have informed the plan's vision and goals. After that, we'll discuss the draft transit alternatives that we're looking at. Then we'll solicit your feedback using Mentimeter, which is a web-based application that lets us record your ideas and your input. If you're watching the recorded version of this meeting, don't worry, you'll still have a chance to provide feedback on our public survey. We'll provide the link at the end of the presentation, and you can also find it on the project website. First, we're going to provide you with some background information about the plan and our project schedule. Before we really get into things, we just want to give a quick review of what the Regional Transit Development Plan is. So regional TDPs are long-range plans intended to identify transit needs and potential transit investments that improve regional connectivity. So these TDPs have a 20-year planning horizon, and they're intended to be updated regularly as projects are implemented and as the regions grow. On the right, you'll see the 6 major elements of a regional transit development plan. At this point in the process, we've completed the first 4 elements. The alternatives development and evaluation and recommendation and implementation sections are in progress now. And input from this meeting is what's going to help us finalize those sections. Here's our current project schedule with the green arrow showing the progress we've made to date. The project team has completed the existing conditions analysis, and we're preparing to finalize the alternatives analysis portion of the plan. This report uses the information gathered from the existing conditions report and the feedback that we've garnered from our previous stakeholder activities to find out what transit improvements are needed, where they're needed the most, and provide a list of possible solutions to those problems. We'll present some of those transit alternatives tonight, and we will incorporate your feedback and the feedback we get from the following public survey into our analysis. Once we've done this, the team will be able to compile a final plan. We'll submit that to the Three Rivers Regional Commission for their consideration and adoption. We're looking at about October for that. So we're getting ready to wrap this up here in the fall. I'm going to jump quickly into some outreach highlights. As I mentioned, we have done some outreach previously. We've had a public meeting similar to this at the beginning of the process. We've had 2 meetings with our Project Advisory Committee, and we've also done a round of public survey and a round of interviews with stakeholders. So we got a lot of public input that has informed this plan. Here you're going to see just a few of the major takeaways that we've taken away from those outreach efforts, including those stakeholder interviews and surveys and such. One big one, many people expressed that they don't think residents in the region, especially seniors, are fully aware of the transit options that are already available to them. Another thing we saw expressed a couple of times was that there's a lot of need to connect to areas outside of the Three Rivers region, especially destinations in Metro Atlanta. We also saw this in our travel pattern analysis we performed. You see that the bordering counties in the north kind of eastern part of the region, the ones that border the Atlanta region, have stronger flows into Atlanta than they actually do to the other parts of the Three Rivers region. So making some of those connections is obviously important. Providing needed transportation service to industrial employers has been a real challenge, especially when overnight shifts are involved. For the area transit providers, vehicle replacement is a real major concern. There were some serious pandemic era supply chain problems that proved to kind of have a long tail, but we see that those are starting to clear up. More vehicles are becoming available on the market and are going to start working their way into transit fleets soon. So we're really glad to hear that. And finally, operations have seen demand return from the pandemic lulls. Ridership is approaching 80% or more in some areas of those pre-pandemic numbers. Continued growth, especially in senior population in the region, could mean that some increased capacity is going to be needed from the current service levels. For a public survey, We asked respondents a series of questions about their day-to-day travel routines, their transit usage, and what they thought needed to be improved in the region. We saw, unsurprisingly, that a large majority of respondents drive alone as their primary mode of transportation. We also found that more than half of respondents in the region had never used public transportation. However, more than 90% of those surveyed still felt that public transit is either important or very important to the future of the region. And a similar percentage, 87%, think there's a need for improved public transit service. On the right, you'll see a ranked list of things survey respondents believe would encourage them to use transit more often. So people would be looking for easier scheduling, a larger, more regionalized service area, things that made it easier to ride, like morning, evening service, weekend service, more service that travels outside of the Three Rivers region, like we were saying, those connections to the Atlanta area, especially the airport, which is something we heard a bunch of different times. We also asked survey respondents what type of trips they would use transit for. Commuting was by far the most common response. People were saying they would need it for errands and medical trips and things as well, but commuting was really by far the highest number. And then we also gave respondents an opportunity for open-ended responses about what transit improvements or changes they would like to see. So most commonly, we sort of classified those into different categories so we could discuss them more easily. And most commonly, people wanted changes that made service more convenient or more accessible. That kept coming up over and over again. 21% of responses involved that. Also, extended service hours was a really popular response, especially among commuters. There were a number of people that mentioned they would love to take transit, but they can't take it either before or after work because it wasn't currently operating during their work hours. Around 16% of respondents wanted to see fixed route services in the region, and then 10% expressly stated that they need connections to the Atlanta region. We also asked the main goals for transit in the region. You can see the responses there. Number one, the most popular, was providing mobility options for those who are unable to drive or do not have access to a car, providing connections to jobs, easing traffic congestion, and connecting to other transportation services were all major priorities. So we took all of that into account as we move forward in the planning process. So all of these inputs that we just talked about, they all fed into drafting our vision and goals statements, which we're going to talk more about now. So here is our project vision that we came up with in collaboration with our project advisory committee. It reads that the Three Rivers Regional Commission will support the improvement of mobility options that connect residents to opportunities within and outside of the region. This will foster economic vitality, enhance quality of life, and provide mobility access for all area residents. Stemming from that vision, we also developed 6 goals to further guide us through this process and to help us evaluate the various transit alternatives that we end up looking at. Those 6 goals will be provided on the next few slides. So one is to provide convenient local and regional transit connections to essential services and daily needs, using innovative technologies to optimize ridership, performance, and public awareness, coordinating with employers and other groups to promote public awareness of available transit options or promote new services. We want to promote additional regional cooperation and resource sharing to create efficiencies in existing transit systems, to develop cross-jurisdictional solutions to provide access to destinations inside and outside of the region, and to ensure that transit providers receive the necessary resources to expand their infrastructure, improve service quality, and enhance the region's connectivity. So taking all of those goals, we sort of started looking at new possibilities for our transit systems in the region, creating some draft transit alternatives. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to use Mentimeter to solicit feedback from this call. People watching the recorded version, again, the public survey will be open for the month following this meeting to provide your input there. But if you're watching live, to participate, let's go to mentimeter.com and you can enter the code here. If you want to just use your phone, you can actually scan this QR code. and I don't think you'll even have to enter the code. So we'll give everyone just a second to get logged in, and then we will move over to our transit alternatives. And if you miss this, when we move on, don't worry, because you will be able to get this code again when we get to our first poll. So we are going to move on. So we're going to start discussing transit alternatives. Those are divided into 3 categories, which are consistent with GDOT's previous planning efforts. First, we're going to talk about transit expansion ideas that create new services or expand the scope of existing ones. Second, we'll talk about transit enhancement options, which include amenities that improve the transit experience or convenience for riders. And then finally, we are going to discuss a couple of administrative tools that could benefit the region. These are sort of back-end solutions. They're a lot less exciting than some of the other ideas, but they can really provide a good bit of benefit at a lower cost and easier implementation than some of the other solutions. So we want to make sure we're looking at those sort of easy wins too. So let's get into it. We'll talk real quick about the various transit modes that are relevant in the region, just so everyone's on the same page. There's a lot of jargon and stuff that goes in the transit world, so we want to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about when we start throwing around these different modes. There's a lot of different transit modes, but when we're talking about Three Rivers region, we're really looking at kind of the 4 modes you see here. Fixed route is something that follows a set route every day, stopping at defined bus stops. Connect Douglas or MARTA's local bus services are a really good example of this type of service. City bus functions best in more urbanized areas, and it's usually really what people think about when they think about public transit. Commuter bus is similar, but it operates across longer distances with fewer stops. Traditionally, commuter bus only operates in one direction according to the time of day. So it goes in town in the morning and out of town at work to take those downtown commuters back to the suburbs. However, we know employment patterns are really changing quickly, as are the fact that a lot of people don't even commute anymore. Work from home is such a big deal. So we might actually be looking at employment shuttles that run in different directions or do other things. So it's not necessarily limited to the pure commuter bus mode these days. Demand response services, those are the ones you'll see here on the right. These don't follow fixed routes, but instead they provide service to customers upon request. So these services can work in either urban or rural areas. The most common form of demand response service is dial a ride, where riders schedule a ride a day or so in advance by calling a local dispatcher, and then a van comes and picks them up. This service is provided across the Three Rivers region by a bunch of different providers. So the Three Rivers Regional Commission Transit provides this to a large number of counties. True Transit, Coweta Connect, and others. So it's a very flexible form of transit, but it can be costly because a lot of times you're talking about long distances and lower rider counts, for especially farther flung rural areas. Microtransit is an emerging form of demand response service that uses real-time dynamic routing to provide on-demand service. So customers request a ride on a cell phone app, and then a bus or van is dispatched to pick them up. Riders are provided an estimated time of arrival on the app, and then sometimes they'll get instructions on where specifically to meet the bus. Microtransit can be really an effective solution in smaller towns or suburban areas where ridership might not warrant a whole fixed route system. But microtransit has to be zone-based, and if the zones get too large, wait times can become long, and you can also run into some affordability problems when the distances get long and the costs starts getting more expensive. So everything's a little bit of a balancing act. There's pros and cons to every mode. Another type of transit real quick that's not shown here is deviated fixed route, which combines aspects of city bus and demand response transit. On a deviated fixed route, the vehicle follows a set path and schedule, but with a little advance notice, they'll actually deviate about a quarter mile or so off the route to pick up passengers. This provides a lot more flexibility, and it can be a big benefit for older riders or disabled riders who might not be able to get to bus stops, but it still maintains a lot of the same efficiencies that a city bus does. So that was a lot of information to throw at you really quickly, but hopefully that helps everyone get on the same page as we start talking about the future of transit in the region. So here you're going to see our first set of service expansion alternatives. First and foremost is looking at ways to expand capacity of the rural systems in the area. It's something we've seen a documented need for in a lot of places. We see it in our demographic forecasts. We know that current fleets in some areas are operating really at capacity for their current fleet and staff. So looking at ways to invest in expansion. Another thing we saw a slight demand for is Saturday service or weekend service. So we would want to start there with a 6-month trial in certain areas to see if that is something that people are interested in. It could really benefit areas transit dependent populations. People work on Saturdays a lot. Obviously, even medical appointments are sometimes moving to Saturdays now. So providing that extra service could be beneficial to folks in the region. Another thing we're looking at is the possibility of creating a unified service area in the western counties. You see the 5 eastern counties in blue, currently served by Three Rivers Regional Transit. Kind of looking at ways we could do a similar system in the western part of the counties. Currently, honestly, the services in the western part do a really good job as is, and the travel patterns there are a lot different than in the eastern parts of the county. So this isn't necessarily an idea we advance, but it's something we want to make sure we're looking at and see if the demand is there for a more unified and collaborative system. We also have a few alternatives to provide transit service for commuters and others in the region. So currently, ATL's express service does go into Coweta County and services Newton. Something we've seen demand for and interest in some previous plans was expanding that into other areas of the region, Carroll County, Spalding County. We want to look at that. Currently, again, with coming out of the pandemic, with work from home and these changes from commuting patterns, commuter bus ridership is a lot lower than it was. We know that ATL, who runs the express system, they're currently re-examining their service levels due to this and have introduced a new Refine the Ride program that's going to change a lot of things. So this might not be something that's feasible in the near term, and maybe something to just keep monitoring as we keep developing plans in the future. But we do want to make sure that we're doing the analysis and laying the groundwork and seeing if there's going to be an increased need for these services in the future. Something we heard a lot of demand for, or a lot of people talking about in our interactions, was ways to get to the Atlanta airport. There's some private options in some areas, but lots of people requested shuttle service kind of thing that runs from Griffin, Noonan, Carrollton areas into the Atlanta airport. There's people in the region that work there. There's lots of people that need to take trips. So it could be a very useful service to run a couple of times a day from the major population centers, and we'll be analyzing that. And finally, we're looking at van pool program that may help fill some gaps in getting people to employment locations. We spoke earlier about how difficult it can be to provide transit service to these more far-flung employers. That's one of the reasons we like van pool. It's flexible, it's user-driven. Employers and employees can collaborate to organize these pools. Really makes the program get to where it's needed the most. They can, like we said, reach out to more dispersed locations, like industrial or agricultural facilities that might not be in traditional downtowns that are best served by traditional transit. So we're going to jump into our first Mentimeter activity. If you have the app pulled up, you should be able to vote here on a scale of 1 to 5 what's not needed or greatly needed for each of the alternatives we just discussed. So we're going to give everybody 30 seconds or a minute to vote here, and just drag your sliders and let us know what you think about these ideas. Hey, we got our first votes coming in. Again, we'll give a couple more seconds, see if anybody else has logged in and is going to contribute here. Expanded capacity and Saturday service got the most consideration here. That's not too surprising. That's stuff we heard a lot about, and I think could be something that's really useful for the region. A little bit more popping in. Got two more, so we'll just give it 10 more seconds. Just make sure nobody else is going to vote, and then we'll move along. We've just got a couple more slides to talk about, and then we'll share some closing information. So here we have a few ideas for microtransit or fixed route services that we saw either in existing plans or we heard about in our stakeholder interviews. There's a couple of small towns or cities in the region that could potentially benefit from these services. So limited fixed route or microtransit zone in Griffin came up a few times. We know there's a number of college students there that don't have vehicle access. And so they have some other transit needs as well. City of Statesboro, Georgia recently launched a deviated fixed route service, and it's been really successful. And that's a model that might carry over well into Griffin. When you're talking about a really small service area, you can actually do a deviated fixed route system pretty cheaply and quickly. So that's something we're definitely looking at. LaGrange and Villa Rica may have potential for a similar service or microtransit as those communities continue growing as well. And that's something that we've seen documented in local plans for both of those communities. So we'll do a quick Mentimeter poll again for these. You may not have an opinion if it's not your community or a community you're not familiar with. So, you don't have to, you can skip individual ones and you don't have to vote, but we do like to solicit everyone's feedback. Okay, we've got a couple coming in. We'll give just a few more seconds, see if we can pick anybody else up. Okay, Griffin is showing up first and foremost. That's not surprising for me. Again, given what we've heard from so many of our stakeholders we've interviewed and our public survey and things like that. So we'll move along real quick and talk about some transit service enhancements. So like we said, these are changes that enhance the amenities or the convenience of riding or make things more affordable. One thing that we've looked at here is the potential for discount programs for targeted audiences like seniors or students, and how those could work for some of the area transit agencies. These programs can then really encourage ridership, and they can help reduce cost burden for disadvantaged passengers. There can be an impact to revenue, so it can be something to consider. Generally, fares are a small piece of the budget for a transit agency, but we also know budgets are tight. Athens Transit has recently done a series of fare programs where they have done free transit for seniors and youth, and have had really a lot of success with it, especially with the young people. If they start doing free transit for people under 18, and kids are using it a lot to get to school and to go to work and all kinds of stuff. So that's been a huge success there. Similarly, we're looking at a way to set up recurring reservation and discounting system. This would let patients with standing orders for dialysis or other medical trips just make sure they've got their things scheduled out ahead of time. You can sort of do that already with some of our transit agencies, so it would sort of be just an extension of that program. And then one other thing we identified from feedback is reducing reliance on cash fares. Currently, every transit system in the region is cash only, I believe, and fewer people carry cash. There's a lot of options now to directly connect digital payment from a bank card or phone or whatnot, and we want to look at options that would work for transit providers in the region while still accepting cash payments, which we know is important for a lot of people as well. So it's all about adding flexibility to the system and making sure as many options are available for folks. One of the simpler but more important ideas is investing in vehicles to maintain state of good repair. As we discussed earlier, there's a bit of a maintenance backlog. So we were proposing that we just make sure that the current replacement plan is up to date and that no one is getting left behind. This is kind of easy and something we've done a bunch of times before, but we're going to make sure that's included in the plan, and that make sure we're on a good replacement schedule for all of our transit fleets. Some aspirational alternatives we heard about included supporting sustainability initiatives where possible. the I-85's the RAID project came up and the ways that transit vehicles can interact with that. Additionally, preparing for the pretty much inevitable transition to electric or hybrid fleets. Those technologies are coming in the transit world, and we've heard a desire from transit agencies to sort of get ahead of it now. They want a little help knowing what's coming next and when. So this could take the form of like an electrification plan that addresses things like required amount of charging space or infrastructure. That's something, again, that we're keeping our eye on. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I mean 1 to 5, again, how would you rank these alternatives? We have 6 options here, and again, we'll give 60 seconds or so for people to vote, and then we'll talk about a few administrative items. Okay, we got 2 responses coming in. Looks like a lot of these are enjoying some support. Digital payment at 5.0. I think that one's kind of a no-brainer. It's something people have been talking about for a while, moving away from cash only. I think people would be glad to see that. Okay, well, we will move on here in just a second to our administrative tools and guidance. That is our last category, and we just have a couple of things we want to talk about here. One is to prepare a regional urban transition plan. We know Three Rivers region's growing pretty rapidly, especially counties that border Atlanta. Some of those areas could grow enough to be classified as urban by the U.S. Census in 2030. So we want to make sure we're prepared for that. It can have some consequences when it comes to federal funding programs and such. So the sooner you get a start on planning to make that transition, the better. So that's something we're recommending. For a growing region like the Three Rivers region, we also heard in our stakeholder input and in our survey, we talked about this earlier, that there's potentially a lack of knowledge about available services. So we want to make sure everyone understands that Dollar Ride service is available throughout the region and it is available to the general public. There's a lot of available resources on how to do something like this. GDOT currently has a Let's Ride toolkit that's really useful. There's the National Rural Transit Assistance Program as well that offers lots of ready-made sort of resources. So if advancing this alternative would basically mean running a 6-month educational campaign in coordination with the Department of Transportation to increase community knowledge about transportation resources that are available to them currently. This could go along with some other initiatives, like maybe that weekend service pilot program we were proposing. Those can kind of be a good fit together. Additionally, we looked at a couple of things that just can make things a little easier for everyone, like a central phone number for booking for the region. So instead of having to look up, the various numbers for your county, if there's just one number, it's on every bus, and then they can get sorted from there. Similarly, a regional website could offer features like trip planning assistance or online booking. There's a couple regions currently doing that throughout Georgia, and that's something we could find a model for. We've seen some good models for that. We also heard several times from folks that there's a shortage of mechanics with the proper certification to work on transit vehicles. Partnerships with local colleges could help train new workers or guide them to a career path toward that additional specialization certification. There's also possibilities of working that into a jobs program or something as well. So again, one last poll for you today. Let us know what you think about these 5 administrative alternatives. Some responses coming in. Again, we'll give 30 more seconds or so, and then we'll wrap up our meeting a little early today. We do appreciate everyone's attendance, and we'll give the link here for the survey, but please go take that survey. It'll look very familiar to you. It's a lot of what we told you on the Mentimeter, but we like to make sure we're documenting as much as we can everyone who's involved and their opinion. Okay, so here we go. A couple more coming in. So we want to leave a little bit of time for questions. If you have any questions for the project team or the local staff, you can use the Q&A feature you see in the top of your menu bar. If you want to just enter any questions, we will get to those. I will move on to the next slide, but we will respond to any questions you put in. We're just not going to stick around on the Q&A slide for long. So like we said, take the survey. It's now open. We're going to leave it open for a month. Please pass this link along to anyone you think would also like to take it. The survey link is available on the project website, which you probably got to the meeting from today, so you can find the link there as well. We really appreciate everybody's time today, but that is all we have. Again, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A chat, and we'd love to answer them. Otherwise, that's our presentation for the day, and please follow us, follow along on the website, and you'll see more information posted as the plan gets finalized. Thanks, everyone.